On 23rd of July, FDC activists, 36 of them were attending a leadership training in Kisumu County. Unfortunately, that fateful evening, Kenyan authorities, through the police and some of our officials in the Ugandan police, entered and whisked them back to Uganda, of which they arraigned them on Kololo grounds and handed them over to the authorities of Uganda, claiming that the police in our country says that they've been arrested on grounds of terrorism. Tonight we are discussing Kenya's extradition of the activists, whether the test of EAC is put on question. And to join me to discuss this very interesting topic is a panel of distinguished lady and gentlemen who will help us unpack and give perspective to this conversation. So in no particular order, but obviously the lady first. Just let her say hello. Yes, let her just say hello, introduce herself. Of course, she's a very big lady in the EAC, and he's also a very big man in his own right and at Uganda Christian University. So both of them are speakers to start with. So I know we're going to have quite an intriguing and interesting debate. Lady, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Drake. It is an honor to be back here after, is it like a year or something?
Some few months.
Yes, but I'm glad to be here. My name is Amanya Belinda. And as Drake has said, I'm the Speaker of the East African Youth Parliament. And I am honored and glad to be hosted here. Thank you.
You're most welcome, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, thank you.
Right Honorable Speaker Edonu Emmanuel.
Hello everyone, my name is Emmanuel Edonu and I'm excited to be back on Civic Space TV, and I can't wait to share and unpack what the discussion holds.
All right, so you maybe didn't tell us that you're also the Speaker of Uganda Christian University.
I really love keeping low-key.
All right, let's keep it low-key then. Let me start with Belinda. In your category, you are the Speaker of the East African Youth Parliament. And in that particular right, I believe you're best suited to start the conversation today. As I earlier stated, that on 23rd of July, we saw 36 activists from FDC Katonga faction who were arrested from a parish, a Catholic parish in Kisumu County in Kenya, who are attending a leadership training back to Uganda, and our government says they were terrorists because they're going to be charged with an offense of terrorism. So picking from there and giving perspective to this conversation, give an overview to our viewers out there who are listening to this and watching for the first time.
An overview about the issue?
The event, yes.
So, well, according to the news, or what we've been reading and hearing, is that a group of 36 Ugandans are invited by an organization in Kisumu, is it Kisumu County? Kisumu County, when they go there for leadership training. Before we know it, they are captured. Some say captured by Kenyan police together with the Ugandan police. Others say no, Kenyan police was not in the whole scandal. It is only the Ugandan police, and then these guys are brought back, and when they are brought back, they are handed over as terrorists. Quite amazing, quite interesting. Another question is, was it an extradition? Was it really one? Does it qualify to be one when we are to look at the procedures for an extradition? Then someone will say it was a kidnap.
Maybe before you get into the extradition, just take us up to speed. What is an extradition and what are the laws in our country that maybe provides for that?
I may not go into detail, but an extradition is more of, if I have committed a crime, or if I am a criminal, I've committed a crime against Uganda, and I am, let's say, found in Kenya, for Uganda to get me out of Kenya, because I need to give respect to a sovereign state, sovereign nation like Kenya, they would not just go and pick me up like it is a territory without boundaries, but they would have to go through legal procedures that bring, I would like to call it mutual respect, go through proper procedures with the law applicable in both Uganda and Kenya, request for those particular group of people. And when that is made, then Kenya proceeds to get these people let's say, arrest them or capture them, and after the capture, they will have to also try them and know on what grounds, what is the matter. Are you criminals? Do you have any offense? And then once they see that there is an offense which is not political in nature, then they may proceed to hand over these guys in Uganda, but without any brutality, without any violence.
Okay.
I'll stop
So
there.
now that we have understood that entirely, I would like to bring in Edonu. She said when trying to explain what extradition is, but also trying to tell us that there are certain offences, but particularly those that are political in nature, are ones that you cannot go ahead and extradite someone. And pundits and various activists have condemned the acts of the Kenyan police or the Ugandan police. We don't know which exactly, which exact officials carried out the extradition. But now the issue at hand is when we saw Semujunganda, the FDC affiliate, on the floor of Parliament when was questioning the Attorney General, that one, there was no extradition request. Two, even without an extradition request, they went ahead and arrested these fellows, and they're charging them with the crime of terrorism, yet they were just attending a leadership training. What's your take?
Well, I had the benefit to listen to Semunyo Ganda while he was making his remarks in the floor of Parliament, and I really expresses his dissatisfaction towards how these individuals were held captive, I must use the word captive, and kidnapped and brought back to Uganda without any just reasons. And I, for one, I must say that the Attorney General, Kiwanuka, gave his response with regards to the situation at hand and saying that they met all the required criteria, what the law, they followed the law up to the dot to ensure that these people were brought onto table. However, still Honorable Semuju still tells him, but in whatever you guys did, there was violation of human rights. You guys went ahead and you were so brutal while conducting the arrests and detentions, and this wasn't proper. It wasn't called for. And in his response to that allegation, he says that these people have been presented to court. Let them, if there's anyone who has been brutally arrested or detained, they should come out in the courts of law and let it known and let the courts decide. But of course, the whole process is that, on my side, is that everything that was done was a little bit controversial, because I read an article from the East African newspaper, and we were questioning how the Kenyan authorities allowed this to happen in their land. The commander, that is Patrick Tito, of one of the counties in, the police commander, one of the counties in Kisumu, made a statement saying that he has not heard of such an incident happen in his county. Then again, we are having the Kisumu governor, Anya, is saying that it's true that these people conducted this arrest in the country and it wasn't proper. So for me, I feel that there's some sort of syndicate that is taking place between the two nations. I do admit that the kind of offense that has been put against them is one that affects the sovereignty of a state, not only the state, but also of the region, and that is terrorism. But we do not have facts on ground to prove that indeed these people had gone to camp to come and threaten the country in terms of terrorism. So I feel on my side, I greatly believe that the move wasn't the right move, and we need serious answers put on table, explaining to us why these people were arrested, and if the government can prove to us that indeed they are planning terrorist attacks on the country, then it must be known to us. Because for me, one thing I know is that for us, we Ugandans, we can't, I have to be very frank, we do not have that kind of heart of being terrorists. I'm not going to use any race or any country, but from the fact that I've lived in this country for the years of existence, yes, they might be there having malicious intentions, but these people genuinely had gone to attend a conference.
All right.
And that is called for.
Madam Speaker,
Yeah.
looking at the relationships between Uganda and Kenya, in the past few years, Kenya and Uganda has relatively enjoyed a cordial working relationship, despite of the fact that there have been issues to do with our trade, with our milk,
Oh, yeah.
and recently with
Maize.
our
Our oil. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So, irrespective of all that, Kenya and Uganda have been, very good diplomatic relations. But despite all of that, where does this leave us in terms of Uganda-Kenya relation? And then on the broader picture, and East African community, because in your capacity, you're quite aware that we are pushing for an EAC integration. But this particular action alone depicts more like it depicts an issue that is the EAC being undermined. Are we maybe fronting an agenda that we are not quite sure whether we shall actually realize that integration at the end of the day?
Well, when you ask is the EAC being undermined regional integration, it becomes a little bit hard to totally break down. But when you look at the incident that happened, so because it becomes hard to believe that the Ugandan police walks into Kenya. The other question is, where did they pass?
Yeah, how?
So they walk into Kenya and go arrest people, Ugandan citizens, and pass via immigrations, walk out with these people. So at a point, I still feel we are missing certain facts. As he put it, we need to speak with facts. Certain dots need to be connected and certain facts need to be brought to table. But they just flown out with the, but still, airport and airspace. Like, we still need to know. Now my question is, how does the Uganda police get there and carry these people out? But then, does it undermine the relationship that Uganda has with Kenya? Then again, I'll answer that question as a Ugandan and say, do the two states want to see it like that? Is Kenya ready to take it as a big potential issue that can make them say, oh, you disrespected us here? Or perhaps, as it was said, perhaps they made arrangements that a part got to know about and maybe the other part did not know about. Because at the end of the day, it's a bit, because when you listen, when you read, for example, I was listening to, there's a gentleman's name you mentioned in Kenya, I've forgotten, I think he's a...
Professor?
Yeah, the professor. But he says, oh, he got to know these people were arrested and taken out.
Brutally arrested.
Yeah, and his only point of addressing, or the point he looks out in the whole issue is the brutal part and the human rights. So to me, that shows, when you talk about the relationship of the two countries, for him in the whole incident, he decides to pick out the brutal aspect. So does it make all the other things right? So did they have the legitimacy to go pick them? So referring to his statement, it looks like something is going on. Because if all you can pick out, to be honest, is only the brutal part, then perhaps you agree with the fact that maybe they were right, they're doing due diligence, they were rightly picking those people, bringing them back to Uganda. Right. Then finally, when we go to the EAC integration, outrightly, when there is disrespect of a country which is sovereign as such, then it leaches, it puts a hole into the relationship of the EAC, because the mind behind the integration is saying, how do we work together? How do we become one? And that can't happen in an area or in a space where one is intending disrespect, unless they decide not to look at it as disrespect.
Okay. Let's just now take the conversation to human rights, because I think that is the focal point. And that being the case, I just want to, first of all, pick your thoughts, and then I'll get to my brother, Emmanuel. Brutality is something that was greatly highlighted by the county governor, professor. And the past few weeks, we have seen a lot of police brutality on Kampala soil here. We have seen young people who are peacefully demonstrating on grounds of corruption, brutally being arrested, detained, and some of our colleagues up to date are nowhere to be seen. Others have been detained in safe houses that are not in proper places gazetted by our law. let us now assess the situation in our country. Have we reached that point whereby the constitution that is supposed to guide us in terms of respect and upholding human rights isn't a document that we follow or even pay a keen respect to?
Well, when you talk about brutality, because we have laws that govern brutality, to what extent do you use force, for example, during arrest? Was there retaliation? Was there excess, them overreacting, and then you say, perhaps I used this amount of force? But then when we go to reality and see, for example, what was happening, with the most recent protests, we saw people marching on streets, and we saw deployment of mambas, and it is a question of a mamba and a placard. When we relate the force, it now becomes a bit hard to defend and say, yes, we love our country. We do believe we need to be secure. We need security. We need to tie all the knots. Nothing should infiltrate our country. But then certain things become hard to defend. So when we bring in the question of human rights and brutality, then we say we are at a spotlight, and this needs to be taken note of, that we are really going against the right agenda, the right arena that is fully laid out by our constitution. And if the handling of the people who we say have the power in the country is in such a nature, then I do think we are going off script, and the laws just remain a small document unless when it is supposed to infringe certain group of people.
Okay. Emmanuel,
Yes.
still on the issue of human rights, the protest that sparked off in Uganda, some people say it was a mirror of what the Gen Zs in Kenya were doing, something that they believe we were trying to copy the Kenyan Gen Zs on their fight against the Finance Bill 2024. Our justification has been for the past weeks that we are a generation that is demanding for accountability, and we have all been privy to corruption, something that we think has affected all our facets of life. Now, relating this to particularly what happened with the extradition of those politicians from Kenya, young people who are attending a leadership training, something that I believe our country should even be paying, doing quite a lot to offer its populace with a lot of political education. And they've ignored that. And you go ahead and arrest them and say they are being trained on how to come and, terrorize or overthrow the government or something of that sort. So how can we relate to that, considering, one, the human rights violations that has occurred in that arrest, but also the bigger picture? Kenya, Uganda, we are not so far away in terms of how we run our countries.
To begin with, you hinted on a very something that hit my mind, and that is political education. You realize that political education is one of the causes that this government is against, I must say. For lack of a better word, I would say that. But juxtaposing it to what you have just said, in terms of what happened in Kenya and what happened in Uganda, and looking at all the different events happening around the violation of human rights, firstly, we must admit that everything in this country is a joke. And I
laugh to the statement.
I'm proud that I'm a Ugandan and to be in the Pearl of Africa, but it doesn't in any way take away me expressing my disappointment towards this country, because we have failed as a country to uphold human rights. Even when the law provides for it, the Constitution under Chapter 4 provides for the human rights, whereas people who are meant, the different institutions and individuals are supposed to implement what is written down, do not implement it. And this now jeopardizes the whole system. As she said, that it's just written down, and basically that's where it ends. So I honestly have to say that we still lack a lot. We need to do a lot, despite the fact that we claim we promote human rights, but we have failed. The institutions have failed, the individuals have failed in these offices. But most importantly, what we need to look at is the amount of proportionality. You understand? That these events are happening. what is the proportionality? Are these people using force to carry out these events? These demonstrations that are taking place, are we seeing people stoning? Are we seeing people carrying different arms or equipment or weapons that can threaten the security of the country, of individuals, of a particular group of targeted people? We are seeing placards, yeah? And we are seeing people expressing themselves. And there is something that I need. I need us to stand against trying to compare ourselves to Kenya. What is happening in Kenya is different from what is happening in Uganda. As a matter of fact, I know of a gentleman known as Philip Mulisa. In February, I think it was God speaking through him. He had organized a march to Parliament before this even happened, before even the Gen Zs of Kenya started going to the streets to riot against the finance bill. And that shows you that it's not like we are trying to prove that what is happening in Kenya must be a replica that is happening in Uganda. No, it's different. We, as the young people of Uganda, are also disappointed. We need accountability. Corruption is a vice that has eaten this country and has slowed down progress and development. But sticking to the aspect of human rights, I must admit that we have failed, because there is no justification to show that we are trying to uphold human rights. And yet this is something that each country must pride in.
Okay. Madam Speaker, it just saddens me that our political situation is the way it is at the moment. A political party like Forum for Democratic Change that has been in existence for close to now 2 decades has been a party that has greatly fronted for change entirely ever since the early 2000s, ever since multi-party politics in this country. The FDC, we saw last year, the faction, there is Katonga, there is Najanankumbi, yeah, and the faction Katonga had its activists obviously in Kenya, and we have seen bare comments, barely any comments from the Najanankumbi faction, which is headed by Amuriat and yes, Mafavi. So what does this mean? Have we reached this point whereby only politicians will comment on issues that possibly makes them score political points? Or are we just now there living what people say for?
Well, I think I will start with the foi and say everything has, there's practically a problem everywhere. FDC itself has factions. One faction is saying, people are there, we are rising to defend and ask questions into the matter. Another group says, ours were not there, so we rather keep quiet, die with your own problems. And so you find that because certain problems are solved with lesser popularity, that is why maybe youth were striking and saying, when we make this issue popular, perhaps there'll be a change in the way it is handled. But at a point where there is such an issue, and one faction goes silent, and the other tries to make some noise and say, no, make inquiries, but these ones are silent, because a silence could also amount to you are fine with the situation, could also amount to you don't want to be involved in this whole issue. And so at the end of the day, it becomes hard to defend from someone who is coming from an outside perspective. And so at the end of the day, we realize that even now, our political parties, where we used to be happy to identify with, to side with, and be part of, and have the feeling of belonging, have also started to split up and break up. At the end of the day, it leaves us at a point of where do we go, where do we align, where do we connect. Perhaps that is why we had statements in the protest of headless, not headless, yes, headless, leaderless, nameless, faceless, such statements, because perhaps when you want to align a certain entity or group, they don't seem to be ready to keep that way. So with the factions that are coming in, then now also becomes hard to put certain things in line, because let's say if FDC was all united, They're a big voice. But we are seeing them rallying and continuing with their normal business like nothing is happening. And then someone says, okay, if it is party politics, who is going to save you? So at the end of the day, it's too much of dilly-dallying and pity parties, and it leaves us disillusioned. Maybe perhaps, as he said, we need more political education being brought back. Perhaps we could get back that feeling of ownership, that this country belongs to us. We need to be patriotic, and we need to fight to put it right.
Okay, I just want us to, in a broader sense, assess the opposition, the close of the opposition in all matters that is going on at the moment. In this country, we have seemingly seen, or have noticed, that trends that there are oftentimes our opposition parties rarely comment on issues that do not directly affect them. And yet, these are issues that entirely affect Ugandans. DP is quiet, UPC is quiet, FDC, Najana Nkumbi is quiet, and all the other opposition parties are quiet, besides only FDC speaking about this matter. Now, what I get, well, from my assessment, what I see is, one, we have a lack of sense of unity with this opposition political parties.
Typically.
But then, besides the lack of sense of unity, we also see that the politicians that we have, or the leaders that we have, are there to serve their own self-interests and not the interests of the people. So now, as a youth leader yourself, looking at, we are possibly headed towards 2026 and all that. So how can we have a more viable opposition in regards to opposition that speaks to issues that affect the citizens and the people? Because if 36 young people are arrested in Kenya on grounds that you barely have proof for, they were just attending a leadership training, that is what they say, then why would you have to arrest them? So as a youth leader, speak to the issue of young people being politically woke, but also opposition political parties being more involved in issues that affect people than just waiting to score political points when the political season is open.
Now, that brings us at a point of too much pain as a nation. We are heading to 2026. We have a group of people who are waiting to come and ask for votes. But when it's time for critical involvement and engagement, they pull away and do not want to take part, which at the end of the day communicates something like, you're there for your own self. If it doesn't benefit you, then count me out, put me out. So even to the youth side, now it leaves us at a point of only and only being used. And it is a painful statement many youth do not want to accept. But the deeper you analyze how the various trends have been happening, you realize you are on your own. Whichever alienation you think you are part of is actually not necessarily backing you up unless they need you to fund something which benefits them. Because, for example, they are young people. They had gone for leadership training.
There were lawyers, there were doctors.
There were lawyers, the doctors. You've gone for leadership training. You've been arrested. And then the other people coming up to say, no, maybe we need to put inquiries into this. No, why are they put up all those questions? It is a small faction of people who say, no, this is supposed to be done this way. Even when we had the riot, for example, we had a few politicians coming out to say, no, this should be done like this. Yes, continue. See, for me, I did this. Everyone wants to come out clean. Everyone wants to say, no, you go. But you as an individual, you as you, or you as whichever political party, I may not want to mention them because of avoiding bias. Why aren't you coming out outrightly? Why aren't you supporting this or coming out to condemn whatever is happening? So at the end of the day, we are heading to 2026. But I still feel, as youth, we are still being used as elements, ticking boxes and only needed when you need something to be done, work to be done. But we as youth need to get to a point where we actualize. First, maybe even the statement.
But how can we actualize? Like, we can't realize that.
Now, one of the challenges I'm starting to realize, there's a time we are engaging with Mr. Romshan, and he made a statement and said, the moment you call the youth, it's more like a disability. There's a way you're cocooned under, less privileged, less what. And then he asks a question, what does the law say about an adult? An adult is 18 and above. And if it is for purposes of work and all that, but with still protection, you can, let's say, be allowed to contract and do other things when you're 16. And then he says, this is just to simply tell you that from the age of 18 or 16, you are a person of sound mind, you are an adult, and you have legitimacy over everything that is happening in your nation. But the moment they categorize a part of the country as youth and attribute certain things and, marginalized what,
But
then it disempowers us.
Aren't we marginalized? Aren't we?
We are not.
We are not. I feel it's something we have accepted.
Yeah.
Because the more they keep saying, for example.
But what is marginalization then?
Marginalization is more like being sidelined and pushed aside. And the more we accept that we are vulnerable, the more we are pushed. Because what would happen if, for example, we saw what the youth in Kenya did. He said, no to being marginalized. We are going to come up and own our nation. Did they try to put things right? They tried to put things out. They tried to get out of the cocoon of, we are youth and we belong here, we belong where.
I would just like to front a different view. I think we are marginalized in our category as youth. Why do I say so? Our country is 41% poor people. Yeah, 41% poor people. Like those.
And what's our composition as young people?
Yeah, our composition as young people, we are approximately 70%, of which out of that 70%, you have approximately 50% children.
Yes.
And the other 20% as people who are in between the ages of is it 16 to 35? Fall under the category of youth.
Yes.
Now, the marginalization that I want to front here is the idea of economic empowerment.
Yes.
We are marginalized on grounds of, one, we are poor. Like, how many young people do you say gigs, like I'm going for a gig, I'm going for this? And that is the economy that we are surviving on. And yet, you have to attain things like education, like medical facilities, because most of our parents are actually not capacity. They do not have that enough capacity to provide for many young people that we see on the streets today. So I think marginalization comes from that category. But then secondly, also our age. You have seen this age conversation that they say you cannot do this because you're young. Belinda, I believe you've fallen. You have fallen victim to that.
But I've tried to break status quo. There are many. Now, let me tell you something. There are many times we've been told you're young, you do not qualify to do this or to be here by age. And the moment you accept it, trust me, you'll always see yourself as young. Even when you do an excellent job, you're shocked. You say, oh my God, I'm a young person. I have done this. No, you are an adult. You are a normal citizen who is acting and doing what you are supposed to do. So I feel it also puts us in a kakuno, in a box of, even when we do what we're supposed to do, you wake up and question yourself, oh my God, I have done this. Oh, I need to be praised. Oh, yet when someone outside the age of 35 does it, it's normal. So when do we normalize certain things?
All right, let me just bring in Emmanuel. The issue at the moment, and I just feel for me it's very important in this conversation, is opposition parties.
Yes.
Opposition parties in this country has greatly been very silent on issues that matter. But when it comes to maybe scenarios whereby the opposition to score political points, they become very vocal. Yeah, they were vocal when it was on issues to do with the anti-homosexuality bill, because they believed maybe they would get some support from
the Christian personality.
The constituencies.
Yes.
Yes.
But now issues to do with corruption. Yes, they've been speaking, but even those political parties themselves are actually part of the corrupt institutions that we have in this country. They've been silent. Few of them have spoken up on grounds of, the young people are peacefully demonstrating, and few of them have actually understood the idea of why young people are doing what they're doing. But besides all that, we only my only issue is our political parties, especially opposition parties, speak only when they feel like they're going to score points. Besides that, they're mute. And why do I say so? 36 young people arrested in a leadership training that most of these political parties are obligated to offer in a different foreign country, who went through the immigration lawfully. Had they had any issue, they would have been repatriated from the immigration point. But guess what? You let them in. They're attending the event, and then you're arrested, and you barely have any comments from our opposition parties. Doesn't that sound a very controversial and...
Or perhaps it's a question of inclusivity. They were not included.
I doubt it's a question of inclusivity. I think maybe it's an issue of priority. Maybe our political parties do not prioritize certain things that much.
I think the whole bit of it that, as she just said, is the aspect, we lack the aspect of unity. Now, some of these political parties have become like money ventures. All they just need to do is establish themselves and get the funding that they need and propel themselves in whatever sector or positions they're in just to benefit them. Because as a matter of fact, just as I told you, I watched Semuju raise this in the floor of parliament. And I expected it to be a center of discussion, regardless of the parties or political parties we affiliate ourselves with, because we needed answers as to why this was happening, because everything these individuals did was in good faith. As you just said, they had all their credentials and they passed through the border going into another country. And you're bringing them back from that country and coming to charge them with an offense that threatens...
A capital offense.
A capital offense that threatens your sovereignty. Now, I think we have scored 0 marks as opposition political parties. I must say, I'm not going to mention people's names here. I was watching news at 1 o'clock and the opposition, I read the headlines on NBS. The opposition are planning to shun regional sittings. You understand? Because I think it's going to be a little bit costly for them to go, according to the person who was reporting. And I'm like, but you are on matters of national importance. I do not refuse. But why are you paying a deaf ear to issues that are affecting your very own? Because I take FDC as a cradle, and that also a bracket that occupies other opposition parties in the country. So why forsake them? Yeah, we are not seeing press release from any political party trying to condemn their activities, or different political activists from these political parties make statements condemning the actions that have taken place. But all we have just decided to do is just pay deaf ear and pay, like, I do not understand what is really happening. And one thing I know is that tit for tat is a fair game. Today it is them, tomorrow it's going to be another party. And that is going to be the trend. You understand? So it will keep on recurring that in case something happens to the other people, we will not have a say on it. We are having how many plus very many opposition political parties, GEMA, we are having FDC, we are having the famous Snoop, yeah, we are having ANT, among others. But what is so hard with them trying to ask and inquire into what is happening in the other political party? Yeah. And what is their take as a political party? Because we have seen people make statements with regards to corruption. We have seen people make statements with the poor infrastructure development in the country. So what is so hard with them addressing the issue at hand, which is affecting them? Because we assume that the reason as to why we are having the opposition party is because they are to put the government in check. And in case they come into power, they are the ones who are going to work on the weakness or the loopholes that the current government is having. So I feel that we need a factor that unites us. But I do not see, the fact is that it seems like the ruling government has weakened the opposition completely in whichever way they have done it, but they are weak. And I could say to some extent they are puppets. The truth is that these opposition parties are puppets. They will not admit, that's the truth, they will not admit, but that's the fact. Because certain things that are very crucial in this nation, these people pay a deaf ear to it. And it's on a scale of 1 to 10. Issues that are very important, I could give them a score of only 2 out of 10. The rest of the things, they do not care. I know. Is it because we are having a majority of the members in the parliament being from the ruling party? No. It's just a question of what are our interests as a country. are we fighting for the common good of the people? So for me, I greatly believe that we need a factor that is going to unite us, be it opposition, but something that brings us together, that we can have a say on whatever happens. And these issues of having self-interest in particular matters, you only rise when you want to have the show and cameras on yourself, having press conferences here and there because of something that is not very important. But when it's things that are very crucial, we remain silent. But also, to a greater extent, you know, the work of the EAC is to promote regional integration. She knows the things better. Yeah, cooperation, peace, and governance.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
and when we see such things happening, it jeopardizes the aims and objectives of the East African community, because there is nothing that is really showing, is giving us. There is no proof. Even if I may ask you, the East African community has not released.
Emmanuel, I'm just going to cut you there. We're just going to go for a short break. Let's come back from the break. You said she knows it better. So we shall start with her to break it down for us and see whether actually it's a possibility to have EAC integration regardless of our in-house problems in Uganda. But let's just go for a short break. See you right there. Stay with us. Bye-bye.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break. Just before we went into the break, we were discussing issues relating to Kenya's extradition of youth activists, I would say, from the Forum for Democratic Change Party, who were repatriated back to Uganda and handed over to Ugandan police on Kololo grounds. And Ms. Amanya Belinda and Mr. Edonu Emmanuel are putting into perspective this composition. But something that caught my attention just before we went into the break was we're discussing the silence among our opposition parties when it comes to issues that affect Ugandans directly, and their inability to have a unified front to voice out the issues or concerns that affect Ugandans. Let me just give my perspective before I indulge you, Belinda. What I would feel, or what I see other opposition parties in other countries do, when there's an issue that directly affects the citizens of a country, irrespective of whether you belong to a particular party A, because you feel for your person, because you are all citizens of that country, you must have a comment, you must have a say, you must fight for those people. But what we get in our country, yes, these are cadres of FDC Katonga faction, but above all, the citizens of Uganda. And what we see is silence from NUP, silence from UPC, silence from all the other political parties. Even besides these events, we have seen political prisoners who have disappeared and they're nowhere to be seen. And still, all the other political parties are still quiet. Now, what can we do? Because Edonu mentioned that we need possibly a common suffering for us to feel our brother's pain. But shall we even reach that point where we have a common suffering for all the political parties to respond when there's an issue? That is one. But then two, as a speaker of EAC, what role does the East African community would then have to play in such issues? that we are facing between Uganda and Kenya, but also other countries like Rwanda, Kenya is having issues, Rwanda, DRC. Like, there's a lot happening in the region that puts the EAC on a weighing scale.
So when we talk about the journey of integration, then we talk about the so many fights that are happening between the East African countries. Then it is a question of when will we get to the actualization of the integration. Because yes, we talk about the EAC, but the EAC is more of just a concept that has not yet been fully actualized. So when you're talking about the EAC, you keep that at the back of your mind, that the EAC is where we are journeying to, is where we wish to have. So it is a concept. Yes, we have all come together. So this is the concept we want to push together. But some internal fights and internal moments have not been harnessed, and which now makes it difficult. Because, for example, now we say, what is the say of the EAC in such a situation?
Yeah.
Now the question will be, what is Kenya's say? Before EAC comes in, what is Kenya saying about it? So if Kenya is not raising an issue, if the only issue Kenya is raising is one of violence and brutal and the brutal arrest, then perhaps like the EAC may not be any different. Because if in the entire arrest, all you point out is the brutality, they are likely to also come up and say the same. Because perhaps the other two opposing parties, it's like a parent having two children, Drake and Belinda are children to Emmanuel, and we come to you, and all I cite out is, he took my pencil, or he pinched me, and they leave out the part that he was, maybe I was playing or doing my things, and then he came in to interrupt or something of the sort. Then that leaves them at a point of how are we able to come in? And then still now we go back to the other part. Should the EAC be, allow me, for lack of a better word, call it nosy, of get into matters of, let's say, Uganda? Because Uganda is saying FDC has taken people to Kenya for a training which is one of terrorism in nature. They are training them to come and maybe overthrow the government or threaten the peace of the existing government of the nation. And when you come to Uganda, it is an FDC Katonga versus, let's say, Uganda. And the entire Uganda is silent about it. Only a small faction. So it is okay. It lacks direction. Where does it come out? Yes, we want the region to be concerned, but when countries still have things that have not yet put right, because who makes up the EAC? It is the people. It is not an independent body, but it is these same countries that still fail to align and put right themselves. Yes, we want to give them too much power and believe they're able to bring this, unless we say now there's a potential fight or a potential issue of contention. Kenya says, no, we want to go against this. They report to the East African Court of Justice. So when it goes there, then perhaps you're going to see their involvement. They're going to come up and say, okay, we're going to rule maybe in favor of this, or this should be done this and this way. But before that goes there, you may not hear them come out. That is why we've been having issues, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, blah, blah. But they've been silent. The question of, okay, when they come, let's see how to work around it. Or you still have your independence. Or maybe some people don't want to talk about it. So if they don't want to talk about it, do we drag them? So if they refuse to comply with the integration, okay, let's leave them to see how they manage themselves. And so at a point where certain things have not been made right inside, charity begins at home. If we want to pinpoint and call out, let's say, the EAC or any other body that should be coming out, it is a question of we as citizens. Are we looking at Uganda as a pie, like a pie or a pizza, when it's pizza and everyone picks out their piece and is okay, the remaining part, we either split it, equal share, or whoever is still hungry, you can have it or take it home. So Uganda is at a point where we're just a piece of, we are a whole round pizza, and whoever wants to grab a piece is either grabbing a piece. And we have lost the one voice, the unity. recently you have been making the statements about opposition. That is what opposition has decided to taint and to picture. But then still, why call out only opposition? Uganda is not made for only opposition. But what about the ruling government? What about the people in the ruling party?
But they're the perpetrators of all that is going on.
Perpetrators, then we ask us, don't they have an independent mind? Or what happens when you say you're serving the nation? If you're serving the nation, then you're going to come out and say, but there's a problem here because I serve the people. It is not, well, I'll say it regardless. It is not the government, the ruling party you're in that brought you to leadership, but the people that voted you there. Then who are you serving? Or to whom do you pledge your allegiance? So until we get to have ownership and acceptance of a nation and know that Uganda does not belong to anyone else, but Uganda is ours, which also looks very far to realization or actualization. But we continue to pray as our anthem really says. We bless Uganda in the hands of the Lord.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what I would say on that. But there's too much disillusionment for the country.
All right, let's just maybe, besides the issues that we've discussed regarding the extradition, I just want us to touch still on issues of human rights, something that has affected both Kenya and Uganda, and that is what we saw in Kenya, the peaceful protests. The peaceful protests in Kenya were propelled because of a finance bill that Baba Raila Odinga termed as it would clamp down on investment. On the other hand, we see Uganda peacefully demonstrating on grounds of corruption. Uganda, on the other hand, the peaceful protesters were arrested. Others have been arraigned before court and released on bail. In Kenya, we saw approximately 60 people have lost their lives. A few have been jailed, but the fight still continues, and there's relatively respect to the rights of the people. So I'm just going to forward this question to you, Emmanuel, then later I'll come to Belinda. Looking at these two countries in terms of growth as a democracy, what are those lessons as a country we need to draw from our neighboring country, Kenya, in regards to democracy and where we want to see ourselves as a country?
Thank you for that. You take me back to my constitutional history and constitutional law. And if there's one thing I'm going to commend Kenya for, is to some extent for upholding the rule of law and also having an independent judiciary that can command. Now, with a country like Uganda, power is centralized under the CIA commander-in-chief. Whether you like it or you don't like it, he pulls the bigger strings and he has a bigger say on most of the things that happen in the country. And it's evident, we all know it. We remember when the court had ruled for the property of the Muslim community when it was attached. You heard what the president said. I was telling the Chief Justice to use his common sense. And that's not the case when it's in Kenya. Yeah, we saw when these protests were happening, we saw the judiciary came up and was condemning the actions of the police on the citizens. We saw the pressure mount on all these people and literally, so I could say that Kenya is quite at some level much better than us.
Democratic maturity.
Yeah, democratic maturity. In the whole, I think the whole region, I could say for them, they have really embraced some of the dynamics of the rule of law. But we're talking that we have to ensure that we uphold human rights, and we have to see that the judiciary is independent, and we have to see that equality is promoted, like everyone, no one is above the law, which is a different case for the country of Uganda. But there's always some hope. I strongly believe that someday, someday we'll be there. But as it stands right now, Kenya has shown us level in terms of promoting the rule of law. That's what I could say.
Belinda, what's your say?
Well, when you were talking, I remembered when we were ranked, was it third? Third in Africa for democracy?
Yes.
Which position was given? Perhaps we define democracy different.
Yeah, that's true.
Perhaps that I will leave that discussion
People
there.
argue that democracy is just a matter of taking it to the ballot, and that's it.
Everyone will have their argument and their definition of what democracy is.
Yeah.
But Kenya and Uganda, I think we are two different countries.
True. It's very true.
We're two different countries. Our governance is totally different from theirs. You can threaten, let's say, a one Ruto, and you know he'll not come back to power. Which is not really the case here. It's a bit different. And so when we are looking at juxtaposing Kenya and Uganda, it becomes hard because we're living in two different worlds. Their realities may not be our realities. Their power may not be the power we have.
Yeah.
And at that point, that is when we somehow lay down our tools and say, okay, let us wait for whatever will befall us. Or perhaps keep pushing. We thank God at least we did not have deaths in our protest recently that happened, unlike our brothers in Kenya. And we keep praying perhaps if...
But you said no, we couldn't have so because you saw very many young people were first of all afraid to take it to the streets. But also people, we did not have a unified front. Other people were against the idea, others were for the idea but were afraid, those who were for the idea not afraid. So it's and you, also how the streets were packed with
You
military.
wouldn't see a mamba and come running. Do you know if you're a person who has been watching action movies, those VJ Junior kind of movies where you see and then there's an what do they call RPG, RP? What do they call them? Those guns. Those. I may not be good at those things, but you're seeing such things posed to you, and you're a young person who has only lived in a generation of peace and calmness.
But I still ask that question: what does peace look like?
Yes, it could be relative, but when you've not grown seeing such things.
But we have grown up seeing that on the road most of the time.
On the road, that's why they pose a potential threat to you.
Yeah.
That's why when you see a mamba, you're like, I'll keep home. I'll be an online soldier. Let me make my tweets. Let me go on WhatsApp with my friends, make memes, and keep talking about this. But when we go to actual fronts, it is, am I ready to? No, I think. So at the end of the day, someone will watch you and say we're living in a state of fear.
Military state.
Yeah.
So
That's
if we are living in such, know that certain things, we have limits. You've heard of I'll quote it and say that freedom of speech is there, but once the words leave your mouth, your freedom ends there. You have it before you say any word. You have a right to speak and express yourself. But at the point where you express yourself and your words are released, the freedom is cut off. It goes to wherever it goes.
Yeah,
And so when we now go back to the question you asked of rule of law, it's in some instances we still have the rule of law.
Really?
On some matters,
Instances where you even don't issue any extradition request or orders and you just...
we are waiting
bashing-
to hear what Kenya... You see, one thing that got me silent or that got me wondering is where's the position of Kenya? Why are we only seeing one county or one professor coming out to speak? Don't they have a central communication system? Don't they have a way of communicating to represent their
But
country?
bear in mind, this has happened now like a week, almost a week.
A week ago, so we are waiting for a month for them to come out and speak. If it
That is
really
something.
touches the reputation of your country, immediately you would have a statement. Or in a week,
Yeah.
there would be a statement released.
true.
There would be something that is happening. And then at a point it is, okay, perhaps there's a story we are not hearing.
Definitely.
So if there's a story we are not hearing, we might have to first, but why are you silent? We are only hearing a story that is coming from Ugandans who have been oppressed, and in this point, they are the victims.
All right, so we are approaching towards the end of the show, but I think something that I would feel very bad if we don't discuss in this conversation is what lessons can we draw as young people but also what can we do to better push for both our countries, Kenya and Uganda. But of course, not drifting far away from the topic of discussion today. So I'll just start with you, Ms. Belinda. What lessons can young people, first of all, draw from the events that have been going on in the past few weeks? That is one. What lessons can political parties in our country draw? But then three, what lessons or what can the EAC maybe do differently?
Lesson one, I'll start with the personal one, really, which I think, which I do believe many young people by today have noticed. These so-called political parties, we have come to realize they're not really ours. And we have come to get to know the actual placement of youth. You know, we've been talking about, we want participation, and not only participation, but involvement in decision making. You now know where you lie, because if you are really critical stakeholders, perhaps the entire Uganda will be revolting on why has this happened? Why is this being done like this? But at a point where it's only Katonga coming up to fight for the 36 that have been arrested, then you get to realize it is the one who you're tied to that is responsible to you, and perhaps the rest may never get to yearn or to discover that you're Ugandan and you need protection or you need to be treated right. And out of this lesson, we also learn to be united as young people. If I am to say that, can we rebuild this nation by one starting with it being united? Because perhaps the people before us have not embodied that unity that we desire to see in a nation, that unity of this should be done for the good of Uganda, not for Funirawa or not for God and my stomach, but for God and my country actually. Can we uphold what our motto says? Can we stand for the truth for our nation and stop the factions? Because right now you get to realize your alienation does not matter. Perhaps just by virtue of saying I am Ugandan, perhaps your nationality will save you than your political party affiliation or alienation. And can we learn to draw the line? When do we become, for example, it's out of context, but I'll borrow it. Chimamanda Ngozi once said, there's a time to be Nigerian, there's a time to be, I think she says she's Igbo or something of the sort, but then she said there's a time to be a tribe, there's a time to be a nation. There's a time to be African. There is a time you can be FDC. There is a time when you can choose to be highly NRM or NOP or ANT. But then you should remember that you're also a Ugandan. So can we front the patriotism of being Ugandan first before we go into the various splits? And at that point, then we shall get to make perhaps more sane reasons and more sane choices in the battles we chose to indulge in and in the ways we chose to fight and save our nation. But then at a regional level, the lesson we learn from this is that nations are also beyond bureaucracies.
Yeah.
Some nations have their own personal relationships that they've created over time, which may not just be seen out there so hard. So nations have a way they also relate with each other, and each perhaps would be at the lookout of the other as an ally. And so we need to also understand that politics is not just as the way we see it, but there is much more into politics. And so with this, my lessons and my realization is to first seek out the why and get to know the facts before we react. Perhaps you may find yourself reacting on a wrong cause or on wrong statements that you may regret at the end of the day. So can we be more factual, more, what do they call it, twegendelezenyo in the things we're doing to avoid being caught off guard? But also, can we, at the peak of it all, can we be Ugandans? Can we be patriotic? Can we stand for the nation? Without Uganda and without its people who make Uganda, this country is going to be left in shambles.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Emmanuel,
Yes.
I know it's your birthday today. Happy birthday.
Happy
Thank you.
birthday.
Thank you.
Where is the cake?
Typical Ugandan question once again. Lessons.
Okay, one of the lessons that I pick from the whole situation that is happening in the region is that we need to resist from the politics of parties and from the politics of ideologies. Because if we have one...
But the ideologies have failed us.
Ideologies are tied to parties.
No, like, I mean, like, I'm quite sure that most of these political parties always have one ideology that is common to all of them. You understand? Yeah. Of course, as earlier on, we already discussed that the agenda has changed because these people keep on fronting different ideologies. But initially, I think that most times we are blindfolded and divided along political affiliations, which is very wrong. And so when something hits us, an atrocity hits us, we tend to sit back and be like, no, that hasn't hit me, it has hit the other person. And it's not what is really called for. We need to be united. We need to speak one language. If something is affecting our brothers and sisters from another political party, we should feel the pinch. The one from NRM, from JEMA, is feeling the same pinch. I shouldn't stay silent. So we need to become united and resist the politics of political parties that confine us and never want us to associate with each other. But also, we need also, some of the lessons that we also need is that these political parties also need to open up to the young people, not only the young people, and we really get to know what are they for? What do they stand for? Do they stand for the citizens, or they have their own agendas that they stand for, that they are fronting? Because most often the young people are brainwashed and manipulated by being in these political parties. In the end, just as you started saying, we end up being defined as marginalized, and yet that's not the case. We need to be a little bit intentional about our political parties and speak for the truth and fight for the reality. We need a just society, and the just society we can only attain it if we are very honest and truthful to each other and fight for the same goal. So you cannot see others suffering and you pay a deaf ear to it. That's why I told you that today it's me, tomorrow it's going to be, it ends up being a tit for tat.
Yeah.
So which is not something that we want as a nation. Yeah. But also, regional-wise, I could say that, as she stated it expressly and said that some of these countries have bilateral relationships that are very concrete, solid, and you realize that it might be very hard to intervene, especially where you're having this exchange of power dynamics, you know? A lot of political contestation happening here and there. And so it becomes a little bit very difficult sometimes for even the community to come out and be like, and condemn some of the actions that are taking place, because she mentioned something that some of these states are sovereign states, and if they do not come to you for any assistance, you do not have to pop your nose into their business. So I think we need to attain the aims of the East African community.
Okay.
If they're saying they're promoting regional cooperation, regional integration, promoting peace and stability and so forth, all the aims that it has, let it be the actual peace. Let it be the actual integration. Let it be the actual cooperation, not just allowing the situations in the different countries to keep on creating political tension amongst themselves. Yeah. Then, which means that we will never realize a goal that we are fighting for.
All right. Thank you there. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much, Belinda. It's been very interesting and insightful having both of you on the panel. You guys have given me the viewers very good ideas and insights to the conversation. Otherwise, Thank you very much to your viewers out there for always taking time to watch this very interesting inter-university show. To the production team, Pal and crew, thank you very much. And Center for Constitutional Governance for making this possible, Civic Space TV. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.